Hey, hi, my name is Eric Chadwick, and I wanted to show you guys this glTF asset that I've been working on. It's a test of two extensions, the transmission extension and the volume extension. You can see them here. Transmission extension basically gives us clear glass and colored glass, and you can affect kind of the roughness of it, but it's infinitely thin. It has no kind of refraction. The volume extension gives you kind of volume to the surface so that you can then do light bending effects. The other thing that it affects is you can do attenuation, which is awesome, which basically says the thinner the surface is, the less the light color is affected or absorbed by the color inherent in the material itself. So if you have this tinted glass that this thing is made of, the thin parts are going to attenuate that lighting more than if you just have the same thickness across the whole thing. So the volume kind of gives this thickness to these surfaces. So back in the model, there's these eyeballs in a jar with this kind of soupy liquid. So let's take a look at how this is made. It's pretty simple. The model itself is just a cylinder with these balls placed inside of it. And the balls are, eyeballs. But if we turn back on all the stuff here, we can look at the material itself. The material itself uses this, the volume extension to give the attenuation. So let's look at that. The thickness controls how much the surface is refracted. Basically, how thick is the surface to tell the rasterizer like this, the real-time renderer, how to render the refraction of the balls inside. And so as we increase the thickness, well, we're going to see that the light rays get cut off sooner because it thinks the surface is thicker than it is. But you can control that with the tinted distance, which is the attenuation distance. That's basically how deep into the surface do light rays go before they get affected by this tint color. So generally it works kind of better in this asset with kind of a lower thickness value and on a lower tint at a distance kind of attenuation value. And then you can kind of get that effect. Now the thing is that with, say, zero thickness, then you've got no refraction going on. There's no bending of the light rays going into it. So no matter how you tint this thing, it's never going to get that color because there's no thickness there. So we have to increase the thickness to some value. The other thing that's happening here is that I'm using a thickness texture. And what the thickness texture does is it says where it's black, it's going to be less thick, and where it's white, it's going to be this maximum thickness value. And how this works is this is a depth texture that's baked from the surface of the cylinder towards the balls. And then I inverted it. So the balls that are closest to the glass are going to be darker here because they're inverted, but they'd be white in a depth texture, and further away from the surface, they're going to be black. But I invert it and so that we could get more attenuation between the balls and less attenuation where they get right up against the glass, and so we get that kind of foggy effect. The other thing I did is add a roughness texture, and the roughness texture is the same texture, and it says the spaces between the balls is going to be rougher and blurrier, and the balls themselves are not going to be as blurry. And we can affect that by changing the overall roughness value to totally decrease that down to nothing. Then you can see what the effect of the attenuation is without that blurring. So you still get that coloring of the depth, and it's using this thickness texture to kind of color it. But it's not as convincing because you can still see details deep inside the surface. So that roughness kind of gives it a bit more kind of softness and makes it look like the volume inside is actually breaking up the light rays as they go deeper in. So what else? The other cool thing is that you can change the tint color, and so you can make it a totally different effect. And this tint color is a multiplier. So with the tint color set to white, there's actually no color being applied. It's just the roughness of the eyeballs themselves. So you're getting no effect, even though we have thickness and we have a tint at a distance. You have to actually add some darkness to this texture in order to get some kind of tinting going on. And let's increase the roughness again, kind of see more of that effect. The other thing that's interesting here is if we increase the tint at a distance so that it's a really high value, then we're saying the light rays have to go really far until they hit this tint color. And so we're seeing no tint because it's so far. Well, this allows us to change the thickness value so you can really see what that's doing on its own. And it's basically changing the index of refraction for the surface, so we're getting more distortion going on. But it's also adding again distortion that's probably not helping us much. But the thing that's interesting here is if we decrease this tint at a distance, and we get back to seeing some kind of color value there, and adjust this value a little bit. If the thickness is really low, then the balls tend to break apart from the actual texture at an angle. So the thickness texture here is only on the surface of this cylinder. Let's hide the lid, it's kind of easier to see that. So this where that's going to show that it's clear in the attenuation, it's actually divorcing itself from the ball at an angle. So you get kind of these artifacts where it doesn't quite match up and look great, and it only looks kind of good dead on. So what helps is to increase the thickness a little bit, and that pushes the eyeballs right up against the glass more, and then you get less kind of that break between the thickness texture and the effect of the attenuation, but you get more distortion from the refraction. So it's kind of a toss-up, and it's kind of tweaky what kind of value works here. It's really small values. So if we change the color, for example, to be more kind of a bloody red, you get more of a kind of a medically accurate maybe kind of thing. And you can do a lot with it. It's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun to play with. Anyhow, that's basically it. Thanks for watching.